It all begins in the Maghreb Empire, where people gather to celebrate Prince Horus on his 18th birthday. In this glorious event, the maids whisper among themselves about the prince's future. They say the prince can finally discover his magical affinity. One maid comments that among the 5 siblings of the royal family, Prince Horus has the highest magical power, so surely he will receive a strong element like fire. In the Grand Library, people gather impatiently to witness what amazing magical powers the special prince will receive. But when the young prince places his hand on the magical orb, the device reveals shocking news. Prince Horus's affinity is sand. The announcement leaves all the guests speechless and confused. 1,000 judgmental eyes lock onto the young prince as people start gossiping about how useless sand magic is, since the user can never use any other type of magic. Hurtful words echo across the room, saying that even with high magical power, an illegitimate son is still an illegitimate son. Some call Horus useless, and even his own father tells him that he is a disgrace to the royal family. For being a useless son, Horus is banished to the desert to eat sand for the rest of his life. Prince Horus stands alone in the wasteland, reflecting on his situation and wondering if things would have been different if his affinity wasn't sand. Nevertheless, he isn't ready to give up yet, even in exile. He's ready to live in the desert since it's actually the perfect place for sand magic. But first, he needs to find water to survive. Casting a magical circle, Horus activates his sand sense ability. With this power, he touches the hot desert sand, closes his eyes, and traces the nearby water source. When he reaches the spot where he found water, Horus uses another technique called sand swirl to create a massive spinning vortex in the sand, drilling down toward the water source he detected. As water starts bubbling up from the deep hole, Prince Horus celebrates his success, as he now has secured the most important resource for survival. Next, he needs to find a place to live. The prince starts constructing his new home using sand magic and creates elaborate structures rising from the desert floor, building himself a magnificent sand castle. The castle boasts intricate architectural details, just like a mansion in Beverly Hills. The following morning, Prince Horus wakes up with a new problem. He realizes he needs to continue expanding his new home. Now he needs food and plants near the water source, and he also wants glass for windows to make the castle more comfortable. So he activates his sand sense once again to explore the surroundings for anything useful. But suddenly, while scanning the area, Prince Horus detects multiple heat signatures. Someone has collapsed and is surrounded by several threatening creatures. The prince wastes no time and immediately hurries toward the location to investigate. Using his sand magic, Prince Horus propels himself across the desert at incredible speed. Meanwhile, in another part of the desert, a girl and her camel are in trouble. Ugly goblins surround them, looking hostile. The disgusting creatures make threatening sounds as they close in on the defenseless girl. The camel stands ready to defend his unconscious master lying helplessly on the hot sand. As the goblins charge to attack, Prince Horus arrives just in time. Without hesitation, the prince casts Sand Spear, launching sharp projectiles of hardened sand at the attackers. The sand spears pierce through several goblins, though a few manage to survive. This time, Prince Horus shows no mercy. He unleashes a massive sandstorm, followed by numerous sand rings that finish off the remaining enemies. With the goblins defeated, Prince Horus approaches the unconscious girl and her camel, asking if they are okay. Getting closer, he notices the girl is injured and unconscious. But as he looks up close, he notices the girl is straight up gorgeous. However, he thinks to himself that this isn't the time to simp around. She's beautiful, no doubt, but he needs to focus on helping the injured. So he carries the injured girl, telling the camel not to worry and that he'll help them. But first, they need to move to safety. Using his sand ripple magic, Horus transports them to his castle and welcomes them inside. Inside the castle, he rests the unconscious girl on a bed and carefully observes her condition. At this rate, he doesn't expect her to recover anytime soon. He realizes she needs something nutritious and easy to eat to aid her recovery. Prince Horus quickly activates his sand sense ability, scanning the desert landscape for anything that might provide food or useful resources for his guests. But he grows frustrated when he can't find anything. Suddenly, his magical detection picks up movement. There are biological reactions indicating many creatures in the distance, so Prince Horus decides to check it out. During his exploration, he discovers 2 species of ants fighting. For no apparent reason, he decides to take out the black ants using Sand Spring. The black ants die instantly, and the white ants approach him to express their thanks. To show their gratitude, the white ants give the prince a ball containing a slimy substance. After a moment, Horus realizes it's honey. He thanks the ants and rushes back to the castle to meet his sick guest. The moment he arrives, he hand-feeds the honey to the girl little by little, hoping the nutritious substance will help her recover. The treatment seems to work because the next day, Horus wakes up to find the girl sitting up beside him, eyes wide open, asking if he is okay. Before Horus can say anything, the girl expresses her gratitude. She says she wishes she could repay him somehow for saving her life, and thanks him deeply for rescuing her from the monsters in the desert. Then the girl admits she might be asking for too much, and then boldly asks if she can stay in the castle. The request surprises Horus as looks at her with wide eyes, processing what she just said. The girl looks at Prince Horus with pleading eyes, and then asks again if he could please let her stay with him. Prince Horus is shocked by her unexpected request. But when she says she would do anything, Horus decides to ask for her backstory first. The pretty girl begins by thanking him again for saving them. She introduces herself as Isis and her camel as Raku. Prince Horus also introduces himself and says it's nice to meet them both. Sitting together in the castle, Prince Horus asks why they had collapsed in the desert. Isis looks down sadly and begins to share her past. She explains she can't share all the details but reveals that she was driven out of her country. Prince Horus realizes she's just like him. Another exile forced to wander the harsh desert. Isis asks if he has been exiled too, surprised to meet someone with a similar experience, and Horus confirms that he was. But Horus reveals that thanks to his sand magic, he is able to survive in the desert since there's no shortage of sand to fuel his spells. Upon hearing about his sand magic, Isis notices that the place where she's sitting is made of sand and says it's a pretty rare element to possess. She's also shocked to see that the entire castle is built from sand. The conversation continues as she walks through the beautiful halls of Prince Horus's sand castle. Isis marvels at the intricate architecture, noting that even the pillars are crafted so intricately using nothing but sand. Even the doors and hallways are made entirely from sand. Isis asks Prince Horus if he built all of this by himself, and the prince confirms that he created the entire castle using his sand magic abilities. Isis is impressed, but also concerned. She asks if it's because of his sand magic that he was banished from his country. Horus says yes, adding that since sand magic only works with sand, people said it was completely useless. Suddenly, Isis becomes very emotional. She declares that she's angry about how Horus has been treated. She points out that he built such an amazing castle and even saved a stranger like her, yet he was banished just because of his sand attribute. She suddenly grabs Horus's hand and makes a heartfelt proposal. She suggests they should build the greatest kingdom on Earth together. Horus is taken aback by the proposal and repeats the word together, unsure what she means. Isis immediately becomes flustered, explaining she didn't mean anything special. She just meant that since both of them are people with nowhere else to go, they could help each other out. Embarrassed, she insists she has no ulterior motives. But then Horus extends his hand, agreeing that since they both have nowhere to go, they can help each other. Isis smiles, takes his hand, and agrees to work alongside him. Prince Horus decides that now they've made their decision, they should move right away and start their new life together. Suddenly, Isis screams in terror as Horus activates his sand magic for transportation. She's terrified by the magical experience while her camel makes distressed sounds during the travel as well. Prince Horus uses his sand wave ripple technique to transport them across the desert. They arrive at a beautiful oasis surrounded by palm trees. Prince Horus then asks that they gather a few plants from the area. Isis recognizes it as an oasis, but wonders how Horus knew this location existed. Horus reveals he used a sand-based magic that transmits vibrations clearly, allowing him to locate objects that reflect sound waves. After which, he shoots down a coconut from a tree with sharp sand balls, and then suggests they go hunting to bring back meat and furs. When they return to the castle, the meat and furs from the hunting expedition are used to prepare a hearty meal. After eating, Prince Horus notes that nuts and cacti are useful water sources, so he decides to plant cacti around a small body of water to form an oasis. Even though it doesn't feel like one yet, Horus tells Isis they'll need to be patient. Moving closer to where the cacti are planted, Isis asks Horus to leave it to her. She activates her life magic technique on the plants, and suddenly, the cacti and palm trees begin growing at an amazing speed. Her magic makes the vegetation flourish instantly in the harsh environment. The plants unfurl their leaves dramatically as sunlight bathes the growing oasis. Prince Horus watches in complete amazement as her incredible power transforms the landscape. To him, her magic is truly spectacular to witness. After the botanical wonder, Isis announces that the oasis is complete. Horus is awestruck and, before he knows it, excitedly locks fingers with her in a high five. He gets embarrassed, but Isis blushes proudly at their successful collaboration in the desert. She then says she'd like to take a quick bath. Nervously, Horus starts to leave, thinking she probably wants to wash off the sweat. Being a gentleman, he decides to wait at the entrance. Isis watches him leave from behind a palm tree, avoiding any creepy peeping Tom incident. After she's sure Horus is gone, Isis strips down to her barest, thinking she should at least clean herself up and not smell like a Discord mod who hasn't showered in months. She seeks Raku's opinion, asking if she already stinks. From the camel's expression, it's clear he has a lot to say, but words fail him. Stepping into the cool oasis water, Isis sighs with relief at the refreshing temperature. The crystal-clear pool feels perfect against her tired skin. She can't help but enjoy the peaceful moment completely. Afterward, Isis starts wondering how to properly repay Horus for his kindness. She wants to think of something meaningful to show her appreciation, but has no idea how to make a boy happy. Meanwhile, at the entrance, Horus tries desperately not to think inappropriate thoughts. His mind races with conflicting emotions as he imagines Isis in the pool, asking him to make a deep bond with her. Suddenly overwhelmed with these cultured thoughts, Horus panics. Then he hears Isis shouting. He rushes to the oasis and gets an exclusive strip show of Isis holding a white ant. Isis freaks out while the prince panics and turns the other way. After she gets dressed, Isis informs Horus that she was just having her bath when the honey ants showed up. The ants approach Horus and seem to want to say something, but Horus apologizes because he can't understand their language properly. As the tiny creatures continue making frantic clicking sounds, Isis comes over and tells Horus she thinks the ant wants them to follow it. Horus thinks it over and decides it's best to follow the ant. So Horus and Isis begin their journey, guided steadily by the ants across the vast desert landscape. Soon, they arrive at an impressive rock formation towering above them. Approaching the massive structure, Horus observes that it looks like a castle made of earth. The desperate ant leads them inside the dark entrance, where the pair discover numerous honey blocks on the cave's roof. The cave is spacious and beyond the range of Horus's sand detection. As they continue exploring the winding tunnels, Horus spots something concerning in the shadows ahead, an injured ant lying motionless on the rocky cave floor. The creature appears to be in serious distress or pain. Moving through the grand underground chamber, Horus marvels at the incredible scale. The cavern feels like exploring a massive underground cathedral or hall. Suddenly, the ant climbs onto Horus's head and points toward the direction of a giant ant. The massive insect sits regally on a throne-like rock formation and warmly thanks Horus and Isis for coming. She declares herself the overseer of the entire underground domain and the queen of the honey ants. Bowing respectfully, the Ant Queen expresses her pleasure at meeting the visitors. However, as she introduces herself, both humans are shocked to hear the Ant Queen communicate with them in perfect human language. Following that, the Ant Queen asks Horus for his help. She reveals she will be meeting the king of the Black Ants, also known as the Iron Ants, to try resolving the dangerous territorial situation peacefully. She says she needs Horus as an escort since honey ants struggle badly in combat against armored enemies. The queen requests that Prince Horus lend them his incredible power, the same magic he used to repel the iron ants earlier. Horus thinks it over and agrees. Together, they begin their journey through the desert to meet the king of the iron ants. As they glide across the desert using Horus's sand ripple, the Ant Queen finds Horus's sand attribute impressive. Isis agrees and praises Horus's magic as amazing. The queen comments on how delighted she is to have the cooperation of someone like Horus, and Horus replies that their help is mutual. Approaching the conflict zone, Horus observes what looks like a dark mountain looming ahead. Suddenly, angry iron ants emerge from their fortress, preparing for battle against the approaching delegation. Seeing them, Horus realizes this negotiation might require more than just words. He immediately activates a powerful Great Sand Wave technique that creates a massive rolling dune that sweeps across the battlefield toward the enemy forces, taking out the ants at the entrance. But after the dust settles, another set of iron ants continues their relentless assault, charging forward despite the magical sand bombardment. Horus quickly switches to his sand bind technique for better control, wrapping the enemy insects in sand restraints and neutralizing them for the time being. The goal remains peaceful negotiation rather than total destruction. After taking out the iron ant guards at the entrance, the trio gained access into the cave where Horus discovers the cave is made of iron sand and wonders if he can control this type of sand since it's still sand. As he places his hand on the cave wall, the iron sand particles start to react. Horus then realizes he can control iron sand, while Isis marvels at how the walls respond like living things. With this new power, Horus can restrain the ants, which allows him to end conflicts without violence or destruction. As they move deeper into the dark cave, they suddenly encounter the massive king of the iron ants. His presence fills the entire cavern with intimidating authority and power. The Ant Queen immediately approaches the king, demanding a peaceful conversation. But the king refuses, saying there's no room for discussion. When the queen insists, the Iron Ant King suddenly becomes completely enraged and repeatedly threatens death. The massive creature roars that everyone will die in his territory and without hesitation, launches an aerial attack at Horus and the others, intent on ending their lives. Seeing the incoming attack, Horus shouts, warning the king not to move. But when the stubborn goat of a king refuses, the prince activates his devastating iron sand binding technique, causing metallic particles to wrap around the Iron Ant King like chains. Surprised by the king's aggression, the Ant Queen shares with Horus that the king isn't normally that stubborn. With this information in mind, Horus quickly activates his sand sense ability to track movements better. Just then, he detects another life reaction inside the king's head, which makes him realize something. The king is under the control of something. Horus then informs Isis of the situation, that the king is influenced by some kind of parasitic demon, and asks if they could use life magic to neutralize the threat. Before Isis can respond, Horus explains his plan, to tear the parasitic demon from the king and bring back his sanity. The only way to do this is without getting close to the parasitic demon and without harming the king. To help, Horus summons his faithful sand golem and orders it to hold down the king, and the golem successfully restrains the struggling Iron Ant King firmly. With that done, Horus then uses his incredible sand magic to carefully perform delicate magical surgery on the king. The technique requires extreme precision to avoid harming the possessed ruler. Working bit by bit, Horus carefully but successfully extracts the demon from the Iron Ant King. Confirming the king's safety, Isis notes that the unconscious ruler is stable. Even though his energy consumption was intense, she believes he will open his eyes very soon. Grateful, the Ant Queen then expresses deep gratitude to Lord Horus for his help, but Horus tells her not to be so formal, saying he simply did what was necessary as a neighbor and trading partner. With this, both ant colonies can now coexist peacefully in the desert. Suddenly, the recovered Iron Ant King begins regaining consciousness slowly. When the queen asks if his brain is now intact, the king questions what happened during his possessed state. Just then, the Iron Ant King sees Horus and Isis and readies himself to attack, asking if they came to bring down his kingdom. But the Ant Queen quickly tells the Bonehead King that Horus is the one who helped save him, leaving him shocked. Shortly afterward, the king hears everything that happened while he was unconscious and feels embarrassed to have been possessed by a demon. He thanks Prince Horus and apologizes to the queen for causing such great inconvenience. The king accepts full responsibility for the territorial problems and offers gifts, but Horus tells him they don't need anything. Following that, Horus then suggests they discuss future arrangements at his castle, and both ant rulers agree to continue peaceful talks there. There, Horus and the ant rulers sit for a serious round-table discussion. Horus wants to propose something important to both colonies, but first, they need to start talking on a first-name basis. With that, Horus asks for the names of the Ant King and Queen for proper introductions. Since neither ruler has individual names, the situation feels somewhat unfamiliar. The king and queen have always been known by their titles. After a brief whisper between the Ant King and Queen, they plead with Horus to give them actual names for better personal connection. Deciding on appropriate names, Horus suggests Mel for the Honey Ant Queen. For the Iron Ant King, he proposes the name Ain. Excited, both rulers accept their new names with gratitude. But shortly after the naming ceremony, a strange sphere of intense light engulfs both Mel and Ain, surprising Horus. Before Horus' eyes, the ant rulers transform into humans, with Mel gaining more curves than Kim Kardashian in the right places. After the full glow-up, Mel excitedly tells Ain that it's a success, and Ain agrees. They then turn to a shocked Horus and declare that they now belong to him, leaving him completely speechless and flustered by their devoted proclamation. The former ant rulers bow before Horus, pledging their devotion to their new king. But seeing the massive cannons on Mel's chest gives the young prince an instant nosebleed. Isis notices Horus struggling to survive and immediately rushes to cover his cultured eyes, insisting Mel cannot remain undressed. So Mel hurriedly whips out a towel to cover herself, only making the situation even worse. To help, Horus then offers to create a robe out of sand instead. Later, while strolling through the magnificent corridors of the sand castle, Ain explains to Horus how they became human according to legend. According to Ain, when humans give names to magical creatures, powerful contracts form between them. He says they only expected to become familiars, so their transformation into human forms was completely unexpected. The Ant King declares it a great fortune and vows to serve Horus loyally until death. Confused, Horus asks if it won't be tough to relocate the Ant Kingdom all the way to the Sand Castle. But Ain points outside, proudly revealing they have already relocated their entire domain there. Surprised, Horus can hardly believe his eyes and asks when they relocated. To which Ain replies saying that as Horus's subjects, they must always be by his side, no matter what. Meanwhile, Mel sits by the oasis, working on creating clothing by weaving leaves. At the same time, Isis shouts Horus's name from down the castle, saying she wants to show him something. She leads him to a barren area and suggests turning it into productive farmland for their growing community. Prince Horus agrees it's an excellent idea, but notes that the sandy soil drains too quickly for crops. Isis thinks it over and then suggests she can make compost to enrich the soil and support crop growth. Excited, they decide to gather the necessary materials for the compost. While searching for compost materials later on, the team suddenly spot a massive lion-like beast prowling in the distance. The creature appears to be stalking something in their territory. Confidently, Ain volunteers to handle the dangerous threat. With his treasured spear in hand, he assures everyone that both his appearance and strength have transformed completely. The massive lion roars menacingly as Ain approaches without fear. Instantly, Ain charges forward with incredible speed and strikes the beast directly. Laughing, Ain declares this level of opponent poses no real challenge. After several fierce attacks, the lion crashes to the ground and Ain celebrates his victory. Impressed, the Iron Ant King realizes he has grown much stronger since his transformation. Horus then approaches Ain and compliments his amazing skill, to which Ain replies that he's honored by the praise. However, their celebration is interrupted when Mel notices flying creatures circling overhead. The scavengers are targeting the fresh meat from the defeated lion. So Mel prepares to intimidate them with her own magical abilities by blasting the birds with light magic. Surprised by her attack, Horus asks Mel about her light magic, and Mel proudly confirms she gained the ability after evolving from being named. Lost in the praises, the Ant Queen declares her powers are for the prince's use whenever he wants. But Horus gets another nosebleed from seeing Mel's two massive dumplings. Confused, Isis wonders why Mel's innocent behavior somehow makes things worse for their poor leader. Suddenly, Isis calls out to alert Horus about something in the distance. The group spots sorghum growing wild across the desert landscape. Amazed, Isis explains that finding this nutritious cereal grain in the desert is incredibly lucky. Excited about their discovery, Isis then suggests they harvest some of the valuable crops and also collect dried plants to use as materials for the field. Impressed, Horus compliments Isis on her extensive knowledge of plants and agriculture. Motivated by his compliment, Isis volunteers to handle the plant preparation work herself. Back at the castle, Isis presents the materials they've gathered for farming and suggests they start making compost. With that, they get to work. Horus then creates a sandbox using sand magic, while Ain and Mel bring in the remaining materials. Inside the sandbox, Isis explains that the compost process involves combining shredded palm leaves, dried sorghum, sand, and water in specific proportions. She also adds leftover nectar from the honey ants and continues mixing the ingredients. Then, Isis uses her life magic to speed up the fermentation process. After several rounds of magical acceleration, the compost develops into rich, crumbly soil. Even though it smells just as bad as your girlfriend's honey pot, the final result exceeds everyone's expectations. Satisfied with their agricultural success, Isis then suggests they work together on the next phase. Confidently, Horus volunteers to shape the compost into planting rows using his sand magic, and then he creates perfectly straight furrows across their designated farming area. Pleased with the progress, Isis excitedly explains that the soil will continue improving over time. She believes their small beginning will eventually expand into productive farmland. Gratefully, Horus acknowledges that their growing community keeps making remarkable improvements thanks to everyone's combined efforts. Surveying their completed work, the group admires their new domain. Their territory now includes a magnificent castle, a lush oasis, productive farmland, and the relocated ant colonies. With such amazing achievements, Horus then thanked everyone for helping build their desert kingdom. However, their celebration is interrupted when Ain suggests building a watchtower for better security. He points out that while the view from their location is excellent, they lack proper surveillance. Horus thinks about it and agrees they might need stronger defenses for their expanding territory. Ain confidently volunteers to protect everyone, though he admits the project isn't urgent. But Horus decides to immediately create their tower using his sand magic. He begins casting an elaborate magical circle to construct the new defensive structure. Amazed, the group watches as an enormous tower rises from the desert floor. The magnificent structure reaches high into the sky, providing an excellent vantage point. Excited, Horus then suggests they climb to the top to test their new watchtower. From the peak, they enjoy a breathtaking view of the entire landscape, revealing the full scope of their growing kingdom below. However, their peaceful moment is suddenly interrupted when a massive eagle swoops down and carries off Mr. Camel. Shocked, both Horus and Isis watch helplessly as Raku is carried away by the enormous predator. The young prince watches as the giant eagle soars off into the distance with poor Raku. Without hesitation, Horus leaps off the tower balcony and immediately activates his sand wave technique to pursue the beast. Meanwhile, the eagle continues flying with Raku struggling in its grip, but Horus manages to get close enough to launch his attack. He casts Sand Pillar to destabilize the flying predator, then follows up with Sand Dust Violent Fist. His powerful sand punch connects with the massive bird, forcing it to release the poor camel. But Raku starts falling toward the rocky ground below. Thinking quickly, Horus creates another sand pillar to catch his falling friend. As they near the hard desert ground, Horus forms a sand ball to land safely on solid ground with Raku rescued. After the heroic escape, Horus notices something strange about their surroundings. Looking around, he realizes the entire area is covered in glittering gold dust. He also spots ancient stairs carved into the rock and wonders what kind of entrance this might be. The steps seem to lead down into some sort of labyrinth. Using his sand sensibility, Horus detects no dangerous traps in the immediate area. He then suggests to Raku that they try going inside to explore further. Before entering, Horus creates a sand golem to lead the way ahead of them. With that, the trio ventures into the mysterious underground structure. Inside, they discover an elaborate palace-like construction rather than a simple cave. The wide corridors and decorative pillars suggest this was once an important place. Horus points out that glittering gold dust is sprinkled throughout the ancient building and thinks about gathering some to decorate his castle. Suddenly, he notices a faint light leading toward a door and decides to enter. Inside, they find a massive statue covered in glittering gold. The sight leaves Horus in absolute awe. However, he notices no signs of monsters anywhere in the structure, and the place seems completely abandoned without any human presence either. Suddenly, the massive statue begins to speak, revealing it's not actually a statue. Horus freaks out as the divine beast introduces herself as Canade, a sphinx and a divine guardian. Horus nearly got a heart attack, realizing the statue just spoke to them, but the sphinx angrily clarifies that she's no statue. Horus immediately apologizes for the misunderstanding, but the great Canade brushes it off. Canade then explains that most visitors get excited about the gold outside and focus on their own desires. However, she finds the young master quite an interesting fellow. The Sphinx seems genuinely curious about Horus and his companions. She assures them they won't experience any hardship in life, only if they agree to remain in her palace permanently. But Horus declines immediately, explaining that he has comrades waiting outside who depend on him and can't possibly stay in the labyrinth forever. The situation grows tense as the Sphinx considers his response, but explains that coming and leaving freely would be disrespectful to her domain. Still, Horus stands his ground, even if she decides to force him. But then, noting his appearance, Canade says he seems quite brave, and then suddenly suggests they play a game instead. The Sphinx poses her challenge with confident authority, declaring that he must answer her riddle before the heavenly gold stuck on the roof falls. She assures him it's a simple riddle with a correct answer and promises that if he solves it, she'll let him out with a special privilege. Horus considers the offer, thinking that if he has time to think, surely he can solve it, and then agrees. With that, Canade reveals the question that will determine his fate. The riddle states, "I am something very cruel, I eliminate the living and am greedy. But then, overflowing with compassion, I cut myself into pieces just to lend a hand to the weak." After stating the riddle, the Sphinx warns Horus to think carefully and not rush, since there is still time. But without wasting time, Horus confidently declares that his answer is humans. At first, the Sphinx looks shocked by his immediate response, then bursts into delighted laughter. When Horus asks if she's laughing because he's wrong, Canade explains she's laughing because he answered so casually, and then confirms that his answer is indeed correct. Curious, the Sphinx asks the reason why Horus answered so quickly without more consideration. Horus then explains that the riddle didn't feel particularly difficult because everything described in it reflects human nature. Surprised, Canade reveals something interesting about previous visitors. She mentions that people who came before couldn't answer because they didn't know the correct response. Horus disagrees, thinking the visitors simply didn't understand the answer. But the Sphinx explains that even when visitors understood the riddle, they still couldn't provide the right answer because pride and position prevented them from seeing the truth. Furthermore, she adds that while clergy get blinded by money, the thief laughs at such noble behavior. With that, the Sphinx decides it's about time for Horus to leave the palace, and Horus thanks her warmly for the entertaining challenge. But suddenly a blinding light shines so brightly that Horus almost goes blind. When he opens his eyes, standing before him is a gorgeous MILF who shocks the living daylight out of him. The statue has transformed into a human, leaving Horus utterly surprised. When Horus asks why she transformed, Canade explains that as a divine beast, turning into a human poses no trouble at all. However, she notes that speaking of her human form, it's actually not bad except for one drawback. Her ginormous milk jugs feel heavy compared to her divine beast form. But then she mentions that men like big things anyway. Just then, she notices Horus silently staring at her balloons and playfully asks if he prefers smaller melons or wants to touch her chest bags. However, Horus cannot say a word since he is captivated by the mountain in front of him and asks what purpose she has in showing him this kind of transformation. Canade responds that she just answered that exact question a moment ago. To clarify further, she explains that before the game started, she promised to let him out with a special privilege if he answered correctly. Now she's ready to fulfill that promise. The Sphinx points to herself, indicating that she is the special privilege he has earned. With a seductive look, Canade reveals Horus's reward for leaving the palaces herself. Noticing Horus's shocked expression, she asks if he's dissatisfied with a divine beast offering to become his kin, but Horus replies that he's just overwhelmed. Canade assures him that if he agrees, he can use the sand gold freely too. Then, she points to a door, mentioning it won't open unless he agrees. She also tells him not to worry, saying that if there's a problem, she'll solve it. With no choice, Prince Horus agrees and finds himself outside the palace, getting squeezed to death by Canade's massive plots. But Horus reminds her they're in the desert and insists she maintain social distance. Following that, Horus takes Canade to his magnificent sandcastle and introduces her to the rest of the team. Isis is a bit skeptical, wondering why a pretty girl like Canade would be alone in the desert. She feels Horus is being tricked and decides she needs to stay sharp and observe. Canade then introduces herself as a Sphinx and declares she's become Horus's kin to serve him as her lord. Upon hearing she is a Sphinx, the group immediately screams in disbelief, and then comments that making a divine beast his kin is expected of Prince Horus. With introductions settled, Horus suggests that since Canade will be living with them, they need to prepare a room for her. But Canade insists on sharing the same room with her lord. She explains it's only natural they stay close as his kin, which makes Isis die of jealousy. Isis immediately disagrees, pointing out that in Canade's current female form, sharing a room with the prince isn't exactly proper. Horus agrees, saying there should be a certain level of privacy. So Isis smugly tells Canade to respect her master. Suddenly, Canade drags Horus away from Isis and suffocates him in her bedding, saying she'll back down for now, but not because of what Isis said. After that, Horus then asks Canade which room, apart from his, she would like, and Canade replies that she wants the room next to his. Isis immediately disagrees, grabbing Horus by the hand and letting Canade know that the room belongs to her. Canade then chooses the other room to the side, to which Isis says she's okay with. Still, the tension and jealousy between Canade and Isis is noticeable. But in Horus's gullible eyes, the girls seem to be getting along. Exhausted from building the tower and rescuing Raku, Horus collapses on his bed, wondering what they should do the next day. Maybe look for food or expand their exploration area. The following morning, Horus wakes up confused about something heavy on top of him. Looking up, he sees Canade dropping it like it's hot on his thighs and freaks out. He screams, and Canade asks if he's awake. Isis hears his scream and bursts into the room, shouting Horus's name. Seeing Canade on Horus's bed, Isis demands to know what in the world she's doing there, which pisses Canade off. Yawning, Canade jokingly claims she was just half asleep and wandered into the wrong room, causing Isis to scream in shock at her obvious lie. Days later, while the girls of the Sand Castle enjoy a relaxing soak under the palm trees, Canade is bored to death, saying she should have followed the master. Canade then starts to brag about being useful to Horus, but Isis warns her to watch her words more carefully. Isis mentions that if Canade keeps bragging, she'll make her take care of the crops. Accepting the challenge, Canade stands from the bath, declaring they should get started right away. Meanwhile, across the desert, Horus and Ain are locked in an intense battle with a monstrous creature. Horus immediately activates his iron sand wall technique to defend against incoming attacks. But the devastating strike clashes with his shield, shattering it completely and knocking Horus to the ground. Relieved to be alive, Horus realizes the attack was far too close for comfort. Before he can recover, another massive ball of mystic energy heads straight for him, but Horus leaps out of the way just in time. Shocked, Horus screams to Ain that the monster is incredibly strong. Ain agrees, saying the creature's power far exceeds what they expected. As they continue to battle the sand turtle mole, Horus explains that the beast has been feeding on the quartz in the region, making it much stronger than other monsters they've faced. Suddenly, the beast charges forward with devastating force, giving Horus and Ain a serious scare. Desperately, Horus summons his magic circle while nervously muttering "iron sand" repeatedly. As the turtle shoots multiple powerful light beams, Horus manages to cast a massive iron sand wall to block the relentless assault. Holding the defense, Horus warns Ain that if they get hit by the beams, it will turn them all into toast. But at that decisive moment, Horus realizes something shocking. The quartz crystals reflect the blast perfectly. He gets an idea to layer quartz sand over their defenses and then coat the surface with gold sand for extra protection. Finally, Horus activates his makeshift mirror barrier technique using the reflective materials around them. With this new defense, they can reflect the deadly beam attack back at their opponent. When the monstrous turtle blasts them again, Horus's creative solution saves their lives just in time. The beam bounces off his reflective shield and fires back at the creature, turning it into barbecue chicken. Soon after, Horus narrates everything that happened to the rest of the team and shows them the enormous defeated sand turtle mole. The girls are amazed by the massive size of the beast. Not only that, Ain points out that the turtle's body isn't just filled with pretty rock, but with sparkly stones. Horus confirms this, saying the turtle's scales are made of quartz, which is used to make glass. The discovery excites the girls as they realize its potential. With that, Horus excitedly announces they will make glass from the quartz to complete the castle's windows, and then calls out to the others for help with the project. He needs everyone to assist in melting the quartz properly. Isis and Mel eagerly agree to help sort out the dried plants, while Ain volunteers to help with the heavy work. Soon, Ain announces that the quartz is ready for processing, and the team starts working efficiently to prepare the materials. Horus begins the delicate process of creating glass from the quartz crystals. He concentrates intensely as he works with the heated materials. Steam and heat rise from his magical glass-making technique, nearly burning his face. When it cools down, Horus is relieved to see the process working perfectly as the glass solidifies. The magnificent castle now boasts beautiful glass windows that sparkle like jewels, and everyone celebrates the successful completion of the challenging project. With the job done, Prince Horus praises everyone for their hard work, and the team seems genuinely happy to have made the mirrors. They all move inside the castle to admire their work. Isis notes the castle feels truly massive now, and Horus agrees, admitting the construction reveals some visible seams in the glass. Suddenly, Canaid runs toward Horus, complaining about a terrible lump on her chest, and the young prince loses all his brain cells just getting a view of her heavenly pillow. Mel steps in to examine the lumps and explains it's natural for women to have them. But Ain interjects, asking Isis if she has lumps on her chest like Canaid and Mel. To clarify, Ain points out that both Canaid and Mel have sumptuous, bouncy assets on their chest, but Isis shows no signs of any swelling at all. The conversation grows increasingly embarrassing for Isis. She tries to hide her feelings by nervously grabbing Ain's fingers, twisting them painfully, and suggests he should probably focus on learning other things first. As Ain cries out in pain, Isis reassures herself that her melons aren't that small compared to the others anyway. She points out that Canaid and Mel's are just way too big. Meanwhile, Horus sadly reflects on how it used to be just him alone in the castle. Now there are 5 people and 1 creature living together happily. He feels grateful for his growing family in the Desert Kingdom, which has made every day fun. Thinking about family, Horus remembers home and wonders how a girl named Morja is doing back there. Despite everything, he still thinks about his family sometimes. Meanwhile, in the harsh desert, the mysterious Morja struggles through the sand, breathing heavily. She wasn't prepared for the brutal conditions of the wasteland, and the desert proves far more challenging than she expected. Exhausted, Morja admits she should have forced her brothers to reveal Horus's exile location, though she doubts they would have answered her honestly anyway. Now, she must search for him on her own. She starts to feel downcast from the rigorous journey, but refuses to return to that castle without rescuing Horus first. As she trudges ahead, Morja spots some rabbits in the distance and wonders if they're real. Just as a rabbit leaps away, a giant frog emerges from the sand dunes around her, frightening her. Quickly, Morja activates her spatial transfer magic to escape the monster's attack. The teleportation spell allows her to dodge the giant frog's deadly strike, saving her life in the nick of time. But suddenly, she's hit on the back by the monster's poisonous saliva. She feels a burning sensation and realizes the creature's toxic secretions are dangerously affecting her system. The poison overwhelms her, weakening her body completely and causing her to slump to the ground unconscious. Will Horus find Magrath before it's too late? Comment, Sandman, if you're hyped to see what happens next in part 2. If you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Thanks for watching, as always.